This is Professor Ludlum. This is the Law of International Business Transactions, LS 4533. This is Chapter 16, International Marketing Law. When you're dealing with other countries, there's a myriad of small details that you have to deal with that make businesses very challenging. For example, one of them is the evergreen contract. Again, this is a concept not from America but from the EU. It says if you've got a fixed term contract that's, I think, over a year in duration, that they can only be terminated, the employees can only be terminated with 3 months written notice. And so if you have long-term employees and you decide you're going to close your factory in Spain, you have to give them 3 months notice. Now in America, perhaps you could close it next week and terminate all your employees. That's not going to make anybody happy, but that's possible. But again, the EU has an evergreen contract rule that says as long as they've had a long-term employment, you've got to give them 3 months written notice. And maybe because it's losing so much money, you are going to close the factory tomorrow, but you have to continue to pay your employees for the next 3 months. And again, these little problems are the things why you need local representation wherever you're going to do business abroad, because there's all these little problems that you wouldn't know of that you're not used to because we don't have them in America, but are problems that you're going to have to deal with when you trade internationally. One of which that catches people off guard is a lot of regulations dealing with marketing. One of which requires, for example, when you advertise in French, you have to use French terms for everything. And despite us perceiving that as discriminatory, the courts have ruled that no, that's equally applied to all industries, to all products. When you sell things in a French country, you have to use French language and all the French terms for it, even if the English terms are much more common. So, an easy example is email. Email is an American term, commonly used in France, but again, they have the French term for electronic mail that's used in their language, and that's required to be used in advertising. Most countries have heavy taxes on all the sin goods, alcohol, tobacco, those type of things that often have lots of restrictions. We have restrictions on advertising sin goods in America, but again, you've got to become very familiar with what restrictions there are in the country where you plan on selling them. One thing I'll mention here is the Nestle instant formula case and goods, the problem with advertisements that claim formula is better than breast milk and those kind of things, and the cultural effects those had. That's one of your discussion topics, and that always creates a lot of interest because that's a very interesting problem that we just didn't foresee when we originally drew that up. One of the other big problems that we have is ethical issues dealing with business abroad. And we have an agreement called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA. The idea that if you're using your influence to bribe government officials in a foreign country to do things, that is wrong, and you can be punished for it in America. Even though you're doing it abroad, you can be punished in America. The problem is not everything is a bribe. How do you know the difference? Well, if you're facilitating, or as we say, grease money to get things done quickly, that is not a bribe. It's a bribe when you pay somebody to make a discretionary decision. For example, if they're deciding yes, no to buy your goods, that's a discretionary decision. Offering them money is a bribe. If they've already decided yes, we're buying your goods, but you want to buy them before the end of this month because that'll be good for your stockholders report rather than next month, and so you offer them money to announce it publicly today, that's really not a bribe. That's a facilitation payment. They've already made the decision to buy your goods. All you're doing is changing the timing of when they announce it. we've had a dramatic increase, as we say, in the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act enforcement. Honestly, during the first 20 years or so of the Foreign Corrupt Practices, it got very little attention. The reason why we've had such new attention to it is the idea of profit disgorgement. In other words, when we catch a company violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, we not only fine you, but we also take back the profits you got from your corrupt gain. So if you gave, let's say, a government worker in Brazil $500,000 as a bribe in order to get the government to buy your goods, we fine you not just the $500,000 that you made in a bribe, but we'll also fine you the profit disgorgement. You were trying to sell them $20 million worth of products, and from that, we're going to fine you $20 million because that's your lost gain from the business transaction. And so very much the benefits or the windfall to the government of going after foreign corrupt practices companies has dramatically increased because the fines and the penalties have way escalated because of this idea of profit disgorgement. Give you an example. A Siemens that was caught doing several naughty things was fined $800 million. And so huge fines. The violators of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act are kind of like the who's who of American companies. Probably every one of these companies are ones that you've heard of. Ralph Lauren, Walmart, Morgan Stanley, Rockwell, Dow Chemical, York International, Chrysler, Halliburton, Westinghouse. Every country that you've probably heard of, even something as innocuous as Avon, has been caught with foreign corrupt practices and facing huge fines. Give you a couple of examples that show the level of this. Walmart got caught in Mexico bribing Mexican officials to get construction permits for new Walmart buildings. Basically, they were bribing them so that they would approve the buildings even if it didn't meet safety codes, those kind of things. Why it was unique is even after they got caught, then the people who investigated them, they also tried to bribe the investigators and got caught again. So it's kind of unique. Hewlett-Packard paid basically a suitcase full of money, over $10 million, to a Russian official who was the sole decider on some government contracts to buy millions and millions of dollars worth of computers for the Russian government, and got caught. What other worry do we have with the foreign corrupt practices? Is not just that we're doing the wrong thing, but it scares away small businesses from doing international business. You remember, most of our companies are small business. We're a small business nation. That's their engine of economic growth. But the problem is small firms read something like a business fined $800 million and just decides, I can't risk this. I can't sell things abroad. As a result, I'm just paralyzed by fear. So I'm going to avoid international transactions just because I don't understand all this Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And how do you avoid the problem? Get local help. If you're going to sell your goods and set up a factory in Mexico, you better get somebody in Mexico that's familiar with the culture, familiar with the business climate, familiar with the regulations, so you know what to do and what not to do. And the same way, an awful lot of, there's a cottage industry of American consultants that when a Chinese company decides they want to do business with America, hire Americans to get familiar with the American culture, the American business climate, all those kinds of things. You can't underestimate the value of having local help who knows all the regulations and pitfalls. You got to know it. If you're investing your life savings in it, you better know where it's going and know the problems that you're going to face. And the better you know those problems, the better your business is going to be able to respond to them.